It was February 2009, and I was working a special convention event at the Disneyland Hotel. As the supervisor for the Belle Valet area, I ensured front-of-house operations ran smoothly until all event guests had departed. This particular event went well past its end time, and caused many on the team to have to do mandatory overtime. Once the last event guest had been taken care of and drove away, it was time for me to close things up and start working on my end-of-night report. It was just after 2:30 a.m., and as I typed, I heard the phone ringing at the Bell Services desk. Clearly, the last Bell clerk of the night forgot to forward it to the front desk. The overnight bellman was nowhere to be found, and the phone continued to ring. So I hustled over and picked it up. "Bell Services, this is Wade. How can I assist you?" I cheerfully asked. "Hi," the frazzled voice of a woman said to me on the other line. "I know it's late, but we're missing our blue backpack from the luggage that was brought up earlier this evening." I could hear a baby crying in the background. "We would just get it tomorrow, but there's a toy in the bag that would really help my son sleep at this point, and I'm sorry, we're so desperate," she sighed. After apologizing we missed delivering it before and taking some information, I assured the woman that I would personally see to it that the bag made it right up to them. I went rummaging through the Bell Services bin and eventually found the blue backpack sitting off to the side of some other luggage. Matching it up, I used my radio to call the graveyard bellman. "Psst! Graveyard bell, parking 1, what's your location?" A few seconds passed with no answer. "Psst! Graveyard bell, parking 1, come in." "Psst! Parking 1, this is front desk. We haven't been able to get a hold of him either." "Psst!" the front desk supervisor said. "Psst! 10-4, I replied. As exhausted as I was, I knew our guests were trusting that their backpack would be delivered, and judging from how loud their baby was crying, every moment counted. So I decided to run the backpack to the room myself. The room was on the 8th floor of the Wonder Tower, now known as the Frontier Tower. Walking across the center courtyard and pool area late at night was peaceful and serene. I always relished getting to see Disneyland property in such a gentle state. When I made it into the lobby of the Wonder Tower, I saw all except for one elevator door had been propped open with repair fences in front of them, including the freight elevator cast members would use to go to and from each floor undetected. It wasn't uncommon to see routine and even preventative maintenance being done in off hours. It's kind of what Disney's known for. And I simply stepped around the work fences to the one accessible guest elevator to make my way up to floor 8. As I entered the elevator and pressed number 8 on the keypad, the door hesitated, as if someone had extended their hand between the closing doors to have them reopen as if to get on. No one was there. Thinking it was a sensor issue and further justified the maintenance that was going on, I pressed for the doors to close again, and they did. A few months earlier, I rode this elevator with the front desk manager, who pointed out to me what looked to be the image of a screaming face in the wall panel mosaic that lined the elevator interior. Freaky and coincidental, I always noticed it after that. The elevator stopped at floor number 5 and the doors opened. No one was there. I held the doors open and looked around the corner into the hallway and saw the area was empty. Walking back onto the elevator, I pressed the door closed button and the doors again hesitated. I began pressing the button several times to get the doors to close so that I could continue to my destination, but the doors refused to close, and in fact, began to make the buzzer sound we would often hear if the doors remained open for too long. Pressing the close button 3 more times and seeing no reaction mechanically, I stepped off the elevator onto floor 5, and the doors immediately closed, and the elevator proceeded back down toward the lobby. What the heck? It was going up, I thought to myself. I was going up. Perplexed, but again chalking it up to little more than the work that was being done, I decided I would take the stairwell the rest of the 3 flights because clearly the one elevator in service was not interested in serving me. I made my way down the long hallway of the 5th floor to the stairwell exit door. Pushing the door forward, I stepped out onto the stairway platform and immediately noticed that it was more dark than usual, and lights appeared to be out. I began making my way up the staircase when I heard a door from the stairwell above my floor open into the shaft, and footsteps started to make their way down my direction. Since it was now closer to 3 a.m. at this point, I thought perhaps it was our graveyard bellman, Anthony. "Graveyard bell?" I playfully called out Anthony's radio call sign, knowing full well he would react to it with a shout back. The footsteps I was hearing suddenly stopped. "Anthony?" I said louder than last time. No response. I paused my movement for a moment to see if I could hear any more noise from above. Nothing. Thinking it was odd that the movement of the person above me stopped, I continued my way up the staircase, assuming I would come across a lost or confused guest. Finally, I reached floor 8 and still hadn't seen or heard anything else. I stood next to the 8th floor door for a moment and listened again to see if I could measure where exactly the activity I had originally heard may have been coming from. Silence. Opening the door to floor 8, I was happy to see lights that were on down the long stretch of room doors. Approaching the room I had written down on my luggage tag, I went to knock on their door when I heard the stairwell door at the end of the hall that I had just come through creak open. I turned my head sharply toward that end of the hall and saw a gap between the door and the stairwell. These are fire doors and meant to force shut themselves, so that this door opened on its own and no one emerged from the other side meant something had to be holding it in that position. I stood in front of the room door, staring down the hall at that stairwell, trying to decipher exactly what or who could be causing the door to do that. Half expecting a cast member or a security guard on their rounds to appear, I waited for a few more seconds until, suddenly, the door shut on its own. Laughing to myself as though I was seeing things, I knocked softly on the room door. The woman from the phone opened it up with a tired, half-hearted smile and a grateful demeanor. "Thank you so much," she said to me softly. "The baby fell asleep, so we're trying to be quiet," she confided. I nodded my head smiling and gave her a big thumbs up. The woman generously tipped me and I wished her a restful slumber. Closing the door, I turned to head toward the bank of elevators when I again heard the stairwell door creak open. I darted back around in that direction to see the door was again ajar. At this point, chills set in as though my body knew something was wrong, but my mind was still trying to logically explain what was happening. With curiosity getting the better of me, and because I was an authority of the hotel, I felt a responsibility to understand what was going on. As I moved closer to the stairwell door, I could suddenly hear big, racing steps on the metal platforms on the other side of the door, as though someone was running away. I raced to the door to try and catch a glimpse of who was fleeing, but when I thrust open the door, Not only was no one there, the sound again stopped. Goosebumps began running down my arms as I knew I couldn't explain what I was experiencing. With the door to the stairwell open so that I was half in the stairwell shaft and half on the guest floor, I decided I would venture back toward the elevator bank to head back down to the tower lobby. As I turned to leave the stairwell, I heard directly in my left ear, almost as if someone leaned in to whisper, "Wait." I jumped about 3 feet back into the guest hallway and nearly tripped into a wall, while keeping my eyes trained on the doorway the entire time, certain someone was about to appear. Heart pounding, blood racing, I reached for my radio to call for support just in case whatever was on the other side of that door was up to no good. The door slowly closed and latched as though someone on the other side was forcing it back into place. Breathing heavy, I walked backwards toward the elevator bank, keeping my eyes locked on the stairwell door as I moved away. Finally, I reached the corner to the elevators. I frantically pushed the down buttons, hoping for an immediate response from the one elevator in service. I would hear the elevator on a floor nearby chiming as if it were being called to other locations. Eventually, I heard the elevator pass my floor entirely and continued going down. "What the hell is going on?" I said to myself. Just at that moment, I heard a baby crying around the corner and down the hallway. My guess baby didn't stay asleep for long, I thought. I slowly rounded the corner to see if there was anything I could do for them, when suddenly the crying stopped. No one was in the hall. Trying to determine how that crying could be present one moment and gone within a millisecond, I watched as the stairwell door again opened at the other end of the hallway, and where there had originally been darkness, instantly a light in the stairwell flickered on. "Psh! Parking 1, graveyard bell!" My radio went off, scaring the holy hell out of me. "Psh! Parking 1 from graveyard bell, come in." "Psh! Parking 1, I responded. "Psh! Hey Wade, sorry for being MIA. My battery went out when I was in the Dreams Tower and I had to come back down to get another one. You need help with anything?" "Psh!" Anthony said. "Psh! Graveyard Bell, were you in the Wonder Tower in the last 20 minutes? Psh! I asked. "Psh! Negative, Parking 1. Haven't been to the Wonder Tower tonight. Psh!" Just as Anthony finished his transmission, my radio died. No warning, no chirping multiple times to indicate the battery was low as it typically did. Just died after Anthony said his had died. Truly spooked, I quickly moved back to the elevators and pressed for service. About 30 seconds later, the doors opened. I jumped into the elevator and cued the lobby button. As the doors closed, I heard a baby crying again in the hallway, but refused to take a second look this time. A few moments later, I arrived in the empty lobby. I hightailed it out of the Wonder Tower and moved back to the main tower where my office was. My manager was closing their door as I walked up, and he said, "Wait, I thought you went home a long time ago." "No," I responded. "I had to run a bag to the Wonder Tower for a guest." "Oh, thanks for doing that," he said to me. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed and shook my head, knowing that if I tried to explain what happened to me, it would probably sound insane. So I finished my closing tasks and walked the underground service corridors to the drop-off location for my keys at the security office. Kathy, who was always manning key control, sat at the desk when I walked in. "Hey, stranger," she said. "Hey," I responded. "You doing all right? You look a little pale," she said, looking concerned. "You've worked this hotel for many years, right?" I asked her. "Yeah, more than I can count. Why?" "Well, I just had a really weird experience in the Wonder Tower and—" "Ha!" she interrupted. "Oh, sweetie, why do you think I work key control? I refuse to patrol or even respond to that tower anymore. Yeah, no, when I was walking up the staircase on Graveyard a few years back and something grabbed my leg, causing me to fall down a bunch of stairs, I swore I'd never work that tower again." "Are you serious? That happened to you?" I exclaimed. "Absolutely. And I could have swore I heard someone whisper, 'Kathleen,' right before, too. And you know what? No one here calls me that. Only my family does. Here I've always been Kathy." The Disneyland Hotel has a rich history dating all the way back to 1955. Over the course of that time, not everything that has happened there has been magical. The Wonder Tower alone saw a man jump to his death from one of the top floors while I was working there. To this day, you can still see the imprint in the pavement at the base of the tower, a spot right alongside the cast member entry and exit ramp that goes to the underground service corridors. I never voluntarily went back into the Wonder Tower, now the Frontier Tower, unless it was to cross over the lobby or enter for a meeting where lots of people would be present. I always got a very uncomfortable vibe being there, and know that something lives on in that tower that we simply can't explain. It was the summer of 2008, many months into my tenure as part of the Disneyland Dream Squad. We were a unique group of cast members brought together from across the resort to help facilitate the Year of a Million Dreams. The Year of a Million Dreams was a shared promotion between Disneyland and Walt Disney World, where 1 million extra special things happen for guests throughout the year. If you were in the right place at the right time, you yourself might be surprised with something extra magical. The promotion was so popular in 2007, the Year of a Million Dreams carried over to an additional million dreams in 2008. Something unique that you could win in Walt Disney World was a one-night stay inside Cinderella Castle at Magic Kingdom. But at Disneyland, we had a one-night stay at the Mickey Mouse Penthouse at the Disneyland Hotel. However, it was important for Disney leadership to have a one-night stay inside the park, just like its East Coast counterpart. And therefore, just above Pirates of the Caribbean, a whole new overnight experience was constructed in the Disneyland Dream Suite. The Disneyland Dream Suite was constructed in the former space of the Disney Gallery. This area also was set to be an additional apartment space for the Disney family back when Walt Disney was originally constructing New Orleans Square. The Disneyland Dream Suite offered up a master bedroom with a master bath and closet space, a parlor and living room area, an interior patio, as well as a secondary bedroom, bathroom, and balcony with an outside patio that faced the rivers of America that many guests can still see today. As part of the Disneyland Dream Squad, it was up to us to act as caretakers of the Dream Suite and several of us would go on to become official concierge for the location. As a concierge, I was responsible for not only maintaining an orderly living space for our guests, I was also there to take care of everything they might need, to respond to every call they might have, to assist them in what would be a night they would never forget. It was one of the greatest jobs of my life. Unlike working on the Disneyland Dream Squad, where the majority of shifts were only during park operating hours, being a part of the Disneyland Dream Suite concierge team meant that we would cover shifts at all hours of the day. This day in particular, I was covering graveyard. Just following the after-hours tour where I would escort our guests through a vacant Disneyland park in their Dream Suite bathrobes to take photos in front of iconic structures like the Haunted Mansion and inside the Mad Tea Party teacups or on board the carousel. I wished our guests good night as I locked them in, separated by a service hallway. The concierge quarters were a separate nook, an office with some space for our own restroom, as well as an additional space beyond the office that was essentially a pantry that acted as a storage facility for custodial and linens, items that you might need for the suite. I activated our alarms and ensured that the entire suite was locked down, contacting our security communications division to let them know, as they oversee all aspects of the resort, that the Disneyland Dream Suite was locked down for the night. Inside the concierge office, we had a monitor with dedicated camera shots overlooking all access points of the Dream Suite, mainly to ensure that nobody was going to breach Dream Suite windows or doors. Our guests were made aware that once they were down for the night, no doors would be opened, no windows would be touched, and that if they needed anything, we were always just a phone call away. The monitor allowed us to see all aspects of the perimeter of the suite, and anytime somebody was trying to gain access to the Dream Suite, they would need to use their employee ID, which would immediately log their information and by alarm let us know that a door was trying to be opened. The time was 2:45 a.m. I had settled into work on the computer with Aladdin playing on the television nearby. As I worked away, I couldn't help but notice out of the corner of my eye on the camera monitor that a certain illumination was happening near one of the lenses. An illumination at the back door just behind the pantry. The pantry's back door exited out onto a platform above Indiana Jones' Adventure backstage. This was a long catwalk that finally would reach a set of stairs that would go down back behind the attraction itself. But virtually nobody used this access point because it was only for Dream Suite business. The illumination caught my eye, and I couldn't quite make out what was going on other than to think maybe somebody had a flashlight and was trying to get my attention. So I stood up from my desk, walked into the service hallway, around the corner and opened the door to the pantry to see the exit door on the other side. The exit door also had a side window. That side window looked right onto the platform where nobody was standing. I put my head against the glass to look outside for myself and couldn't see anyone or anything that could have caused the illumination of the camera lens. Thinking how strange that was, I walked back over to the hallway, shut the pantry door behind me, and re-entered the concierge quarters, shaking it off as nothing more than perhaps a bug or lens flare. I sat back down at the computer and continued to work. About 10 minutes later, I began to hear a knocking on the wall directly in front of me behind the computer. On the exact other side of this wall, inside of our pantry area, was a closet that held a lot of our fine materials needed for the suite's operation. thinking that I was simply hearing things or that it was a sound from nearby, I again shrugged it off. Continuing to work on the computer, I heard the knock again. A little louder this time. I lowered the volume on the Aladdin film and listened in very, very close to make sure that I wasn't hearing things. Not noticing any further knocks, I reached for the remote to again adjust the volume. But before I could raise the volume, the knocks happened yet again. I jumped up out of my seat, raced back into the hallway, opened up the door to the pantry area, and swung my head around into the interior closet to find nothing. Anything in that closet could not have reached back far enough to knock on the wall if it was a person. So I was truly confused at this point. I stood in the pantry for several minutes trying to understand if perhaps it was a rodent that was burrowed within the walls, or if it was weather and maybe a tree nearby. Anything to try and make sense of what I was hearing. It was at that moment I got the chills. And suddenly a memory entered my mind of a fellow concierge who had been at the suite from the beginning, who had told me a story when I first got trained for the Dream Suite that was passed on to her by a cast member that had worked for years as part of the Disney Gallery before we took over. The concierge told me that that cast member had informed her that for years the cast members who worked in the gallery dealt with something unusual. They considered it a friendly ghost, someone that oftentimes if you just ignored them or were polite enough, it would leave you alone. They would leave you alone. However, it was always trying to vie for new cast members' attention. This thought had entered my head, and I shook it off once again as something that just kind of sounded silly, just a little funny, but certainly nothing like that has ever happened to me. I've never come across anything spiritual or ghostly. Laughing to myself, I walked back out of the pantry, shut the door behind me, and re-entered the concierge quarters. Nearly reaching my seat, louder this time, came from the other side of the wall. I raced back into the pantry, throwing the door open and swinging my head right into the interior closet space to find absolutely nothing again. It's as if whatever this is knows that I'm thinking about it. It's as if whatever this is interested in getting my attention. Breathing heavier this time, I'm more and more concerned that this is not leaving me alone. Thinking for a moment, what should I do with a lockdown suite, with guests asleep in the next room, and with no one but myself to try and understand what was happening? I thought I'll shut the lights off and just ignore it for the rest of the night. As I thought about shutting the lights off, the lights turned off. Not knowing what to do, I immediately left the space, shutting the door behind me and going back into the concierge quarters. Pacing back and forth in front of my work desk, I was in complete disbelief, utter shock as to what was happening. It was as if everything I was thinking, it was reacting to. Not knowing what to do, not knowing how to handle the situation, I had only worked 1 or 2 graveyards before. This was so unusual. Should I go outside? Should I enter the guest area? Should I pick up the phone and call someone? Nobody from my team was around. When you worked the graveyard shift, you were solo. Certainly there were other people working elsewhere in the park, but nobody that was affiliated with me or my team. And what would I tell them? How would I help them understand what was going on? Would they believe me or think I was crazy? It was at this point that I sat back down, Took several deep breaths and wondered to myself, is this really happening? With the television still on mute, I watched the monitor of the camera shots nearby, hoping that maybe I would see something that could make sense of the sounds that I was hearing, trying with my logical head to piece together what could be going on. It was at this point that I decided if there really was something in there, it needed to know that it shouldn't be around. It should leave. That it's messing with an area dedicated to people's happiness. It's a dream suite dedicated to helping people live out a magical moment. Still thinking I was maybe a little crazy, I couldn't help but wonder if I didn't ask for it to leave us alone, maybe it wouldn't stop. So I slowly stood up, walked back to the hallway, and stood in front of the pantry door. As I stood in front of the door, I hesitated, reaching out for the handle, waiting for a moment, wondering if I was going insane. I noticed the light turn on underneath the door. Taking a deep breath, I pulled that handle and I pushed inward, walking into the room. As I walked in, the hair on my arm was standing straight up, goosebumps all over my body. This doesn't happen to me. These things don't happen to me. I stood in the middle of the pantry, looking around for any sign of distress, any sign of what could make sense of this moment. And then decided, what could it hurt? Just blurted out. I said, "Listen, whoever you are and whatever you want, this is a place for people to come enjoy themselves. Don't mess with us. Don't mess with our guests. You need to leave and go to whatever light you can see, because this is not a place for you." I stood there a few more seconds, heard nothing, walked back towards the door. As I walked back towards the door, I stepped into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind me. I raced back into the concierge quarters. I picked up the phone and I dialed our security line. "Disneyland Security Communications," the voice said on the other line. "Hi, can you get to the Dream Suite right away? I need somebody up in the Dream Suite right now. There's an urgent matter. I need somebody up in the Dream Suite right away, please." "Could you tell me the nature of your emergency?" the voice said on the other line. I think there's a security breach. I'm not sure. I'm a little concerned that there's something going on up here in the Dream Suite. If you could just send somebody right away, please." I hung up the phone, not knowing how to explain it or what was going on. I needed somebody else with me. I needed people in the Dream Suite with me. I was, for a brief moment, terrified of what was going on. Door alarms signaling on my computer from every which direction. Security officers came in through various corridors, all converging on the service hallway where I was standing. They entered the service hallway and said, "What's going on? Is everything okay? Is anybody hurt? Are you alright? What's happening?" "Hi guys, I'm so glad you're here," I shared with them. Can you step in here for me, please?" I opened up the pantry door to find that one of the standalone racks that was pressed up against one of the corners of the room where various towels and items for the suite sat had been completely knocked over. All of the items on this rack had spilled onto the floor. As we entered, one of the security officers looked at me and said, "What happened in here?" And I said, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain this, but there's something there. I was hearing this knocking in the closet here, and every time I came in, the knocking would get louder, and I was trying to ignore it. I don't know when this fell over, but the lights went out at one point, and I thought somebody was in here. It kind of freaked me out. The security officers looked at each other as though I was certifiably insane. The superior officer looked at me and said, "Are you feeling all right?" And I said, "I know this sounds nuts, and I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call like there was somebody hurt. I don't know how to explain it. This is very odd to me, and I'm concerned that there's something in here, and I don't really want to be left alone with it." One of the security officers snickered. The others sort of looked at each other like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. The superior officer said, "Okay, did you want one of us to sit here with you until the daylight comes, or?" The others laughed. "Look, guys, I appreciate you coming. I wanted to see if, you might be able to make sense of this for me. I don't know what to tell you, but there's a lot of noises coming from the walls. I don't know if maybe there's a rodent problem or if there's something else. I was trying to do anything I could to make sense of what was happening and to not sound completely insane to these security officers as they stared at me as though I was a complete moron." "Okay, why don't we help you clean this up, and we'll hang out for a few minutes. You give us a call if you're concerned about anything else, okay?" the superior officer said to me. "Great, thanks." We lifted the shelving unit back up and began to place all the items back on the individual shelves. The officers stopped looking at me as though I was somebody credible, worth believing, and were secretly talking to each other, quietly, making jokes, thinking something was a little wrong with me. After about 15 minutes, all the officers had departed. I went back to my desk and turned up the TV volume. I didn't hear another sound after that. I didn't hear another indication that there was anything on the other side of that wall. And from that point forward, I didn't hear anyone else have a problem the likes of which I had. Fast forward 4 years. I'm in management. I'm with a completely different team in a completely different section of the resort. Guest relations had taken over all of the care for the Disneyland Dream Suite. I brought my individual training team that I was overseeing in my department up to the Disneyland Dream Suite for a tour. As I brought them up, guest relations welcomed us and began the tour. It started in the service hallway, outside the concierge office. As the guest relations hostess began walking them into the guest quarters, the guest relations cast member that brought up the rear was standing nearest my location. She looked at me and smiled, and I said to her, "You know, I used to be part of the original Dream Squad team that took care of this." She smiled at me and she said, "Oh, how wonderful. What great memories for you." And I said, "Yeah." I stopped for a second, looked at the floor, and she said, "Everything okay?" I looked up at her and I said, "Yeah, everything's fine. I just wanted to know, how long have you been up here? How long have you been looking after the Dream Suite?" She said, "About 8 months." I said to her, "Must be very rewarding. It's a very special location." She nodded her head and said, "Absolutely. I'm honored to be up here." I looked back at the pantry door, and I said to her, "Have you ever noticed anything unusual up here?" Her face went from a smile to a flat line. What do you mean unusual exactly?" And I said, judging from your expression, I think you know what I'm talking about. Do you go into the pantry often? Yeah, I've experienced some really weird things. I don't know how to describe them, but no, I understand, I said to her. I've experienced those things too. She smiled almost in relief that somebody believed her, and she said, yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I said. How many people will ever know about the Dream Suite Ghost? We both laughed and walked on into the hallway to join the rest of the team. The Disneyland Dream Suite is now considered 21 Royal Street, a special upcharge dinner experience that is a part of the back door of Club 33. If you're willing to fork over thousands of dollars, you too can dine in the exclusive dining room that, for even Dream Suite guests, was a location that was on the western planks of the building that even they didn't get to experience. The Dream Suite now sits dormant for the most part, with the occasional custodial cleaning crew coming through and looking after things just to keep it all spruced up and bright. Very few people will ever know what it's like to stay in the Disneyland Dream Suite, and even fewer will know what it's like to have looked after it, with all of its unexplained and odd experiences.